Hey guys, so at the end of my last video, I said, I was talking about how positive affirmations, I think, are just kind of like a Band-Aid fix. They're kind of like a temporary override to your programming. I don't think that they really work long term. I do think short term you can kind of build yourself up a little bit, but I don't think it really changes the underlying programming. So I've had two spiritual awakenings. I've had two spiritual awakening experiences. One was when I was 23 in 2003, and one was when I was 40 at the end of 2019. And what both of them did for me was, what a spiritual awakening, basically what the definition of that is for me, is it was an instantaneous shift in perception. An instantaneous understanding, kind of like a revelation, an instantaneous moment where my perception shifted enough that it caused a whole like bank of beliefs that I had about the world to change instantly. They had to, because once you understand something, if you believe things that conflict with the understanding, they will change organically. Like they'll come up and then you have this new understanding, so the belief just automatically shifts on its own. You don't even really have to do anything. It just kind of happens. You know, like for example, if you really like somebody and then you find out that they are an awful person, if you like somebody and you find out that they're like abusing and molesting little children, your opinion about that person will change instantly. And anytime there's a situation that comes up where you would have automatically had a different thought about that person, you will have the new thought that includes that. You don't even have to try. And then your beliefs about that person have changed rapidly, like overnight, right? So you can have like all these beliefs about a person and they change that fast. It's the same thing with anything else in life. However, much like finding out someone is a pedophile and then changing how you feel about them, it's the same thing with like the spiritual stuff. You can't like make that happen, I don't think. Maybe you can work towards it, I'm not really sure, but my two experiences were instantaneous, unexpected. I wasn't trying to get them. They just happened. Like it was just an instant like understanding, like from God. It truly, especially the first one, the first spiritual awakening I had was directly about the existence of God and my connection to God. I knew suddenly, instantly that that was a thing. I don't know how to explain it. I had a church upbringing and I never bought any of that. So all of a sudden I had this experience where I knew that God was real. God was not the God of religion. God was everything. And that I was a part of that. Like that I was never alone because I was completely connected to this whole thing. That was my first spiritual awakening. And it also came with a weird visual. I was looking at a penny and the words "In God We Trust" started glowing and floating above the penny in my visual field. I'm not the type of person that has this kind of experience either. That is one of two things. The other one included something like that too. That's one of two experiences. You know, I'm not like somebody that sees ghosts or UFOs or anything like that. So, so basically that shifted, it shifted so much, so fast, that it was like the slate was wiped clean. You know, it's like everything that, my whole orientation to life, all of my beliefs, my whole mental construct that was creating my life was just sort of broken in an instant. And it had to be rebuilt eventually. I didn't realize that was going to happen, but for a while I existed in this state of very little mental construct, very little rigid idea about what anything I was seeing meant, about how anything worked. It was just like a clean slate in terms of my rigid thinking system. And in that state was a state of complete peace and bliss. And in that state of complete peace and bliss, you are totally aware of your own perfection and the perfection of everything happening here, the perfection of everybody else. For me, I literally saw my own human self different. I looked different. All the things that I would see about myself in the mirror. You know, I've always been somebody that's like had issues with weight and looks and like putting a lot of value on that. beating myself up a lot over my imperfections, stuff like that. Those things were not visible to me. Like literally, I would look at the same thing that in the past I would have said, that is unacceptable, that is ugly, that has to change. And it would look beautiful to me. It's depressing saying this because I wish I could be in this state all the time. But that was my experience with that. There's like just a complete awareness of your own divinity from that state. And the same thing happened to me in 2019. Slightly different, but it was a very similar download, essentially, with an identical state of peace and bliss for like a month. But because I was 20 years older and a lot more interested and a lot more analytical about how things are happening, this time when I had this month of bliss where everything had been shifted again, there was no rigid beliefs about anything, this whole construct of my mind had just kind of like come into question. This time I was able to notice whenever I was in this state of peace and bliss, which was all the time for a while, I would notice suddenly I was a little disconnected from it. Like I'm not feeling that feeling. What happened? Like, oh, I just had this interaction with this person. We had this conversation and I don't feel like anything bad happened. What happened here? Like I just have a conversation with my business partner, my ex. This is one I remember. We were having a conversation about the direction of the business, and it wasn't a bad conversation. I don't think there was any stress or anything like that from it. But I realized that as we were talking about that, I started to be afraid of letting him down. I started to have this minor feeling of, what if I am not up to the task? What if I'm not good enough to do this? This wasn't like a thought that was articulated. This was a tiny feeling. What if I do something, I let him down, and what if then like he's not there for me when I need him? What if like, it was like this little tiny little thing, but it was big enough from the state of the slate kind of being wiped clean where I was in the state of bliss. It was noticeable because I was slightly out of that state, and I realized, holy shit, like everything in life that's creating pain is like coming from these little thoughts of like failure, I'm not good enough, or like I'm scared, like this might produce a situation where I don't have what I need. It's like this very subtle thing. And I noticed that then repeatedly until COVID happened and a relationship with my friend Steve happened, and then I met Matt, and then my dad got lung cancer, and at that point the torrent of fear and all this other shit was just, there was just so much of it that is like, okay, I give up. It didn't even, I was out of that state, that blissful state, after about 6 weeks. That was about as long, both times, that was about as long as I could go before the 3D world crept back in, or, an event happened that I didn't have a strong enough muscle built up to, not be afraid of and all that stuff, so that I would just like lose it. But all of this to say, all of this to illustrate the point that you really don't have to pile anything on top of what you've already got going on. And positive affirmations are, in my opinion, they're just kind of another judgment call that you're piling on top of this pile of seemingly, negative judgment calls that you've already made that are obscuring this state of peace that's there all the time. Like, it's always there, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to tell yourself anything to get to it. You don't have to do anything together. You just have to remove the stuff that is on top of it. You have to stop thinking the bad things. So you don't need to replace the bad things with good things. You don't need to, do some practice to get into that state. All you really need to do is stop abusing yourself. And you can start by just, the obvious stuff, the big things. Sometimes things that you're abusing yourself with don't seem like things you're abusing yourself with. Like, it just took me 1.5 years to figure out that I really needed to stop telling myself over and over again how much better I could have done. I've knowing that I had that state, knowing that I was in that state at the beginning of 2020, looking back now on all the events that happened in 2020, which was like the year from hell, it's really hard for me not to look at the choices I made and say to myself, you could have done better. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I could have done better. I mean, there were obviously other choices there that I could have made. So it's just the truth. I'm just being honest with myself. You know, like that's like my knee-jerk defense for why I should be allowed to abuse myself. Right? I'm like, I should say that to myself because it's true. Like, you know, bad me that took those wrong actions really needs to be told, you could have done better. Like, you should know that you could have done better. You knew you could and you didn't do it. You bad girl. You know, I've been doing this to myself for the last year and a half. And it's just this mechanism that's in place. I don't know if it's a tool of fear or what it is, but that alone will, you know, constantly telling yourself that you could have done better with something, or, you know, there's all kinds of ways that this shows up. Just not doing that. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit here right now, as long as you don't do the bad things, as long as you don't entertain the thoughts that abuse you, that you're not good enough, that you need to do something in order to be allowed to be happy. You know, you need to have achieved something. You need to not have done something to deserve to just be peaceful right now. Those are the things that you can just stop doing. It's like the perfection is just sitting under the pile of shit that you have crapped out on top of it. So you just got to remove the crap and the perfection is there. You don't have to tell yourself anything positive about yourself. And in fact, I suspect that really is counterproductive. I think if you're telling yourself all these great things about yourself, you're sort of tethering yourself even more firmly to the values of the 3D world. And there is nothing to be found here that is worth anything except for that thing that I'm talking about, this understanding of your own perfection and how perfect this whole thing is and how everyone else is blameless and you know, this made of the same stuff. That's really the only thing of value that can be perceived here, I think. And I think some people refer to that as love. You know, like a lot of people are like, love is the only thing that matters. Love is, and for me, like, love has been so tied to romantic relationships and love that's just not the word I use. I use bliss, like just utter peace. It's the best feeling in the world. Nothing even comes close to it that I've ever experienced, including a couple shots of morphine that were very memorable. This is like being on morphine, but not on drugs. It's the same type of utter peace, painless feeling. And it's underneath everything. It's here right now. The only reason you can't see it is your mental constructs. I can tell you that from personal experience, 100%. If something happens to shake up your belief system in a good way, you know, it's very easy to see that, because all of a sudden there's just really nothing that you can rely on. And if something has happened, like a spiritual awakening where you are in touch with divinity, so there's not like fear attached to your belief systems not making sense anymore, that's when there's this underlying thing that you can sense, and it's better than anything else. It's probably what people refer to as the state of love. But you don't have to do anything to get there. You just have to take stuff away. You just have to stop doing the things that obscure it, which is obviously a tall order and what this whole thing is leading towards, and basically the whole purpose of life. So it's not like this is something you do overnight, but it's something that's good to be aware of the next time you go to do a bunch of affirmations, you know. If it feels good, okay. But I just wanted to share my perspective on that as somebody who has had these two experiences and who thinks about this stuff a lot. So I hope that helps somebody. Have a great day.